We're going to take a look at rounding. We're going to try and find different place values that we want to actually round to. So we're going to use this example that's posted up here, 7,342.36893. And we're going to use that as kind of our example piece as we go through. So you'll notice on this chart underneath where it says decimal place value chart, you notice that all the numbers from this example number up here are placed here in this particular row. So here we've got 7,342 decimal 36893. It's important to note is that to the left of the decimal point, first immediately to the left you've got all of the ones. Then you've got tens, hundreds, and thousands. Okay, and so to the right you also have a similar setup where you have the first decimal place here is tenths, and then 2 decimal places is hundredths, 3 decimal places is thousandths, and 10,000s and 100,000s and so forth as you go further to the right of the decimal. So you are going to be asked over the course of this entire year to round things perhaps to 1 decimal place, or to 2 decimal place, or to the nearest tenth, or to the nearest hundredth. On rare occasions, and in trigonometry, I'll ask you to do it a couple of times to round things to 4 decimal places, but usually you're going to be rounding to either 1 or 2 decimal places. If you have a number that has no decimal places, for example, if you just have the number 2, and there's no decimal that comes after it, that's known as a whole number. Decimals indicate a fraction. It represents a small piece of a whole. And so that's where that whole idea of decimals and fractions and them being interchangeable comes into play. So we're going to take a look at a couple of examples here. And so when we're looking at figuring out how do we actually round, we'll look here where it says number 2. It says look at the number directly to the right of the place where you're rounding. Okay, and then you're going to ignore every number that's after that. So for example, if I was to ask you to round to the nearest tenth, okay, or to 1 decimal place, you want to be looking at that number, okay, so number 1, and then ignore, basically, you want to look at the number to the right of the one that you're rounding to. So I want to round to the nearest tenth. So the immediate number to the right is over here, that's that 2, and then I'm just going to ignore every other number that's to the right of that 2. Okay, that 2 is going to determine whether or not I round up or down. The number to the right of the decimal place I'm rounding to, if that number is between 0 and 4, then I'm going to leave the number that I'm rounding the same. So in this case, in the example that I've got posted up in the chart here, if I'm rounding to 1 decimal place, that number happens to be a 3. Okay, so this number, number 3, I'll just quickly highlight that right here. This 3 is what I'm rounding to. So I look at the number above, or immediately to the right rather, the number to the right is a 6. Well, 6 is a number that's between 5 and 6, and so therefore it raises the number that I'm increasing by 1. So this 3 is going to become actually a 4 if that's what I'm rounding. So let's do a couple of examples underneath here. So I'm just going to quickly erase this stuff. And then I'm going to go through and I'm going to show you a couple of examples as we go through. So with these examples, and again I'll leave that section there, look at the number directly to the right of the place that I'm rounding, ignore every number after that. Okay, so in this first set of examples it says round to 1 decimal place. So for A, I've got 5.3576. Well, I'm rounding to this decimal place right here, the 3. Okay, that's the decimal place. So immediately to the right, I've got this 5. Well, 5 is a number that is higher. That's either 5 to 9, so that's going to increase the number I'm rounding by 1 unit. So this is actually going to be 5.4. Okay. If I look at example B here, then I've got 126.41435. So again, I'm rounding to 1 decimal place, so I'm rounding to this 4. The number immediately to the right of the 4 happens to be a 1. So that means that because it's between 0 and 4, so 1 is between 0 and 4, so I leave the number I'm rounding the same. So that's just going to stay as 126.4. For option or question C here, it says, again, rounding to 1 decimal place. So I've got 2.697. Okay, in this instance, I'm going to round this to 2.7. And the reason I'm rounding to 2.7 is that, again, I'm looking at 1 decimal place. The number to the right of it is right there, that 9. And so that 9 means that it's going to be rounded up. So that 6 rounds up to a 7. Okay. So in the second example here to the right, it says round to 2 decimal places. Well, the second decimal place in this case, I'll just switch to green pen. So now my second decimal place is here. That's what I'm looking at. So in all 3 examples, I'm looking at that second decimal place. So now I got to look at the number immediately to the right of that second decimal place. So here I know I've got 5 decimal 3, and then the number immediately to the right of the 5 is a 7. So 7 is between 5 and 9, so I increase my 5 by 1, so that becomes 5.36. In part B, I've got, again, 126.41935. I'm trying to figure out what to do with this 1. Do I round it up, or do I keep it the same? So in this case, the number immediately to the right of that 1 is a 9. That means I'm going to increase the 1 by 1 value. So I've got 126.42. And the last one, C, it says 2.697. I need to deal with that 9. So in this case, I've got my number to the right is a 7. Okay, so that means that the 9 is going to round up. Well, the next number higher than 9 is 10. Okay, which means that in this case, not only am I rounding that 9, but that 9 actually rounds up to a 10, which means that that 6 becomes a 7. Okay, so instead of it being 69, it's going to round up to a 0.70. Okay. If I continue on, and I want to round to, in this case, 3 different decimal places, I can do the same thing again. So if I look to round to 3 decimal places, now I'm looking at the 7, and I'm looking at the 4, and I'm looking at the 7 again. Okay, so in this case, this is going to turn into 5.358. Okay, because the number to the right of the 7 is a 6. That means that the 7 is going to get bumped up to an 8. Over here, I'm going to end up with 126.414. Okay, because the number to the right of the 4 happens to be a 3. 3 is between 0 and 4, and therefore my 4 stays the same. Same idea here with example C. I end up with 2.697, because again, to the right of that 7, that's my third decimal place, is a 3. 3 is between 0 and 4, and therefore my 7 stays the same. I do not have to round it up, it just stays where it is. Okay. Lastly, we'll go and we'll take a look at rounding to the nearest whole number. When we're rounding to the nearest whole number, that means we're actually rounding this piece. The nearest whole number is once you start getting into the 1s, 2, 3, 4. No decimal places at all. Same deal applies. You look at the number to the right, or the first decimal, and if that first decimal happens to be a number that is between 0 and 4, then you just keep that first whole number. If that first decimal happens to be a number between 5 and 9, then you round that whole number up. So in this case, 5.3576 rounds down to just the nearest 5. 126.4 just rounds off to 126. Okay. Again, we're looking at that whole number. And then in option C here, 2.697 actually will round up because 6 is bigger than 5, and therefore it's going to bump things up. So that actually becomes 3. Okay? And so that's what I want to cover in terms of rounding of decimals. You're going to be asked to round decimals throughout the course. Just make sure that you're always looking at the number to the right of the number that you're actually rounding, or to the decimal point that you're actually rounding.